The bridge was a ruin. Mira stood at its edge, staring across the chasm that split the valley like a wound. The structure had been elegant once. A suspension bridge built by the Vryn, all crystalline cables and hovering platforms. Now it was a skeleton. Half the platform sections had fallen away, leaving only the main support cable stretched across 200 meters of empty air. Below, the drop vanished into mist and darkness. Behind her, the Vryn cubs huddled together, their fur bristling with fear. "We can't cross that," said Elder Korith, his voice a low rumble. The massive Vryn stood 3 meters tall, his silver-streaked fur catching the dim light. "The cubs will never make it." Mira looked back at the group. 15 Vryn cubs, each one barely knee-high to her, their wide eyes reflecting the emergency lights of her suit. They'd been fleeing for 3 days now, ever since the Zaleen warships had begun their bombardment. The Vryn settlement was ash. These cubs and their guardians were all that remained. "The canyon goes on for hundreds of kilometers in both directions," Mira said quietly. "The Zaleen will have scouts on this side by morning. We're out of time." "Then we fight," Korith growled. "With what?" Mira gestured at the handful of adults. 6 warriors and a human engineer against a Zaleen hunting pack? She shook her head. "We cross or the cubs die." Korith's ears flattened. The Vryn were a proud species, apex predators on their homeworld, warriors and hunters. But they were not climbers. Their massive frames and digitigrade legs were built for power, not balance. And the cubs. The cubs were so small Mira knelt beside the nearest group. Tavi, the smallest of them all, pressed against her siblings, trembling. The cub's fur was the color of storm clouds, her eyes huge and terrified. "Hey there," Mira said softly, extending her hand. Tavi sniffed cautiously, then pressed her small head against Mira's palm. The human had been with the settlement for 8 months, installing water purification systems. She'd watched these cubs play in the gardens, listened to their chirping laughter. She'd promised Tavi's mother she'd keep them safe while the adults hunted. Tavi's mother was dead now, buried under rubble. Mira stood and walked to the bridge's edge. The main cable was thick as her thigh but slick with ice. She tested it with one boot. It held. "What are you doing?" Korith demanded. "Humans are good at one thing," Mira said, checking her harness. "We're stubborn. And we don't leave anyone behind." She clipped a safety line to her belt, not that it would help much if she fell, and stepped onto the cable. It swayed beneath her weight. The wind picked up, howling across the chasm. Mira crouched low, wrapping her arms around the cable, and began to crawl. The metal was so cold it burned even through her gloves. Each movement had to be precise. Shift weight, slide forward, breathe, don't look down. The cable vibrated with each gust of wind, threatening to shake her loose. 20 meters out. Her arms began to scream. 50 meters, and the wind nearly threw her off. At the halfway point, Mira stopped and looked back. The Vryn stared at her from the far side. Even from this distance, she could see their shock. Humans were small by Vryn standards, fragile things that needed heated suits to survive their planet's cold. Weak. But Mira wasn't turning back. She kept crawling. When she finally reached the far side, her arms were numb and her legs shook. She collapsed onto solid ground, gasping. Then she stood, waved, and shouted across the gap. "It holds! Send the cable harnesses!" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then movement. Korith was rigging something, a harness system. Using the emergency cables from their transport, smart. The adults could clip the cubs in and guide them across while they crawled behind. The first cub, clipped in, was Tavi. The tiny Vryn stood at the bridge's edge, staring at the impossible distance. An adult secured the harness around her small frame, attaching it to the cable with quick-release clips that would let her slide across while staying connected. But Tavi wouldn't move. She looked at the chasm, at the cable, at the drop below. Her whole body shook. "Tavi!" Mira called from the far side. "Look at me. Just look at me." The cub's head lifted. "I made it," Mira shouted. "You can too. One paw at a time, okay? Just follow where I went." Tavi's small claws extended, scratching against the cable. "Come on, brave one," Mira whispered, though the cub couldn't hear her. "You can do this." Tavi put one paw on the cable. Then another. She started crawling. The cub moved slowly, her body pressed flat against the cable, harness clips sliding along the support line. When the wind blew, she froze. But then she'd see Mira on the far side waving, encouraging, and she'd move forward again, meter by meter, paw by paw. Tavi crossed the chasm. When she reached the other side, Mira caught her and pulled her to safety. The cub's whole body trembled, but her eyes shone. She'd done it. Good girl, Mira whispered, holding her close. Such a brave girl. Behind Tavi, other cubs were watching. They'd seen the smallest of them cross. They'd seen the human cross. If those two could do it, one by one they clipped in. One by one they crawled, some cried. Some had to stop and rest, clinging to the cable while adults called encouragement from both sides. But they all kept moving. Because Mira had gone first. Because Tavi had followed. Because humans didn't leave anyone behind, and that courage was contagious. By the time the first Zelene scout ships appeared on the horizon, all 15 cubs were across. The adults followed, moving more quickly with their size and strength. Korath was the last to cross. When he reached Mira's side, he looked at her with something like wonder. "Your species," he said slowly, "is insane." Mira laughed, exhausted. "Yeah, we really are." She looked down at Tavi, who had fallen asleep against her leg, tiny paws still trembling with remembered fear and triumph. "But we're also stubborn enough to crawl across bridges when everyone else says it can't be done," Mira added quietly. "And sometimes that's enough." Behind them, the bridge cables sang in the wind as they began their journey into the mountains. 15 cubs and their guardians alive because one human had been willing to crawl first, and tiny paws had followed.